Believe it or not, like this is where it gets really hectic. Well, he was roommates with Abby Hoffman. I've just never seen anything to that level of lawlessness and freedom and complete unhinged hedonism. In cowboy boots, jams, a Misfits t-shirt, and a cowboy hat. And that was like pretty typical for me at that point. And he's like, Hollertronics. And I'm like, that's a dumb name. I don't want to put them on the lineup. And he's like, no, trust me. I'll tell them in kind of disjointed order, but it's fine. We're not really talking on a timeline, and time is an illusion anyway, so who cares? This is essentially an untold story, but if anybody is the person to tell this to, it's you.
Hey there, it's me, Roxy Cottontail. You might know me as a DJ, artist, designer, and New York City party promoter, or from my bunny logo. I'm putting all that on the table and writing about the years that transformed music and the New York City scene. I've interviewed 250 friends and colleagues I admire. I ask all and reveal all. Please join me and the tales to rediscover the 90s and the Y2K magical landscape of music, art, technology, and streetwear. This is Roxy's Tales.
So I'm Tommie Sunshine, originally from Chicago, brought up in the house scene there, and then lived in Atlanta for a little stitch in the 90s, and then moved back to Chicago for a few years, and then came to New York. I've been a New Yorker for almost 19 years now.
My guest this week on Roxy's Tales is Tommie Sunshine, producer, DJ, artist, activist, and one of the original disruptors of electro culture. Before EDM had an abbreviation, before electroclash was a movement in the Y2K era, Tommie was in the rooms, breaking rules and building sounds that would ripple from Chicago to Atlanta to New York City and far beyond. It's an honor to sit with someone who helped shape the underground into what we're dancing to today. Without further ado, Tommie Sunshine.
New York has always, like the minute that I came here for the first time, like to play and was, in the scene and kind of looked around, I was like, this is the first place I've ever felt at home. Like, I felt like the people in this city were my contemporaries. Like, I felt like everyone here could keep up with me. New York was just absolutely incredible at that time, as you remember well. And there were all these scenes that really kind of overlapped. Like all of kind of the best moments for me have always been like that. Like, in Chicago, going out in the industrial scene in the 80s, like, dancing to Nitzareb and Front 242, but at the same time dancing to like house music, but at the same time dancing to like De La Soul and like all of this great stuff. And then all the rock whole contingent in Chicago hung out in those clubs. So there was like always this massive overlap, and New York was the same in the early 2000s. Like, you had guys that were in bands, and you had, models, and you had all these crazy people from all these different walks of life, and we were all partying together. And it was really great. And I'm unsure that there's much of that now. There was just this really beautiful moment where it felt like everyone was partying together.
In Chicago, I know that you were part of the rave scene and the house music scene there. When did that begin for you, and what was like your music trajectory?
I started going out in Chicago. I was very, very lucky because I got to see the kind of the seeding of a number of scenes in Chicago. I started going out in 1986 when I was a sophomore in high school. And, all of my friends that were in the drama club, were all these like crazy kids who, were closeted gay kids, and they went to the city to go dancing, and they were like, hey, do you want to come dancing with us? And I was like, well, that sounds fun. Like, why not, right? And we go to Medusa's, this club in Chicago that was legendary, like industrial, like house club, but then also saw like Fugazi and Circle Jerks and Suicidal Tendencies in this club. So like, it kind of served a lot of purposes. There's a little more to this backstory that I have to clarify because it makes all the sense in the world, like once you kind of see it all connect. But when I was 12, I was on a family vacation, and a cousin of mine we were sitting on the beach in New Jersey on the shore, and he said to me, he goes, "How do you like living in the suburbs?" And I said, "I hate it." And he was like, "Yeah, I could tell. Like, I get the feeling that, like, you're looking for more." And in this conversation, he broke down what the revolution in the 60s was and like what he was a part of and what he fought for. And he was, believe it or not, like this is where it gets really hectic. He was roommates with Abby Hoffman at Michigan State University. So, Abby Hoffman went on to be part of the Chicago 7 and probably like one of the most important activists of the 60s, wrote lots of books and was just really an inspirational figure. And he was very closely aligned with all of the shenanigans that were going on at that time, was super hyper political and like really like in it. And he gave me kind of this roadmap of what that was about. And by the time I was 14, I had read Burroughs' Naked Lunch. I had read Ginsberg Howl. I had read On the Road and the Subterraneans and the Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test, and was like completely steeped in subculture, like as a freshman in high school. And I looked around at even my own friends, and I was like, I have nothing in common with these people. When I walked into Medusa's for the first time and I heard that electronic music, I was like, oh my God, like this is our revolution. Like this is going to be like our version of that. And I could have never known that it would have turned into like the monstrosity that it's turned into now. Yeah. But like, I knew culturally it was going to be important. Yeah. And then once the rave scene started to take shape in Chicago, that's when I really started to come into my own. And I really I developed this persona. I mean, not the hair, but definitely the sunglasses. Mm-hmm. And started using a lot of psychedelic drugs and like really, really like getting into the culture. And
so when you came up with Tommie Sunshine, that was prior to DJing at all?
Yes, believe it or not. And funny enough, it's kind of like a weird contraction of a bunch of things. Like I was always on the dance floor 100% of the time until they turned the sound system off at every party. Like you couldn't drag me off a dance floor. It was impossible. So one morning when I was heavily, heavily high on acid, somebody came up to me and they said, "Good morning, sunshine." And I was like, ping. And that was it. From that moment on, I was Tommie Sunshine. Basically, the promoters in the Midwest were like, okay, you're here at 10 o'clock when we open the doors. You're here at 10 a.m. when we're sweeping the floor. Like, will you please DJ so at least we can pay you to be here? Like, you're good. Like, you're a part of the furniture. Like, what you've got to get more involved in this. Like, if you're not going to throw your own parties, you've got to at least DJ. When I started to play, I would always play in the second room. I didn't play in a conventional way. I played whatever I wanted to play. Like, basically the way I looked at it was, okay, we're at a rave. We have all our friends here. We're all extremely high. And I need to play the music that I would play my friends if they were in my basement. And that's how I looked at my DJ sets. So I was playing 80s records. I was playing Manchester records, Primal Scream and My Bloody Valentine and the Stone Roses. Okay. But then I was also playing this, like, I had a friend who was really into this very specific moment of hip hop. So I was playing records like Live at the Barbecue and J-Ru come clean and stuff off the first Wu-Tang record, and then would play like Depeche Mode. And like no one batted an eyelash because we were just partying. You know, before this moment, when you went to a nightclub, like there was this very kind of cookie cutter experience that you had in your head. And it was like, it had been kind of designed to be that way over a number of years. And then all of a sudden, promoters are like pulling me aside, like before I get on the decks, and they're like, hey, play really underground. And I'm like, no one tells me that. Like, I haven't heard that in 20 years. You know what I mean? Like, if anything, it was the opposite. Like, they were always yelling that the music was too weird and to play more commercial. But now everybody wants kind of things to be like new and fresh and different. And there's this discovery that hasn't been around in a really long time. And it's funny because it reminds me of that first time I started going out. It reminds me of the beginning of the rave scene and Electro Clash and our moment here in New York. Like, and it's gotten back to that. And it's so exciting because it's like, you know, I'm able to go through 8 genres of music in an hour and a half, and nobody is upset. Like, everyone's with it.
I love the resurgence of creative energy.
I mean, and the resurgence of culture, you know what I mean? Like that, I mean, that was what was so cool about New York in the early 2000s was like, you know, when you went out, you really felt like you were part of something.
Yeah.
Like,
well, it reminded me of what I expected from like the Factory or, you know, Danceteria, where it was just like everyone.
When I was coming in like 2001, 2002, and I was hanging out with Tommy Soleil, and he was like dragging me from club to club to club. We'd go out and we'd go to like 7 clubs in a night. And when I say a night, I mean like 2 hours. And we'd really go in, have a drink, say hello to a couple people, and get the hell out of there and go somewhere else. Yeah. And what was crazy about that time is that in a night, you'd be at a rock night, and, you know, like, you know, you'd be at Dark Room with Carlos D from Interpol bartending. And then, you know, 10 minutes later, you're at Russell Simmons' party in the Meatpacking District on Thursday night. But what was funny is that when that party ended was right around the time that your party started. And it was like this really smooth transition. And I remember, you're going to crack up when you hear this story. Like, Daniela and I came to one of your parties, and I don't remember who was DJing. That's not really important to the story, but it was like we started to dance, and it was really funny because she had no idea that I like knew anything about hip hop, liked hip hop, et cetera, because I certainly don't look like that's my vibe. But like, you know, whoever was playing started to go like deep and started playing like some serious throwback like jams, and I started dancing, and we're dancing, and she just kind of stops and looks at me, and she's like, this is new. I've never seen hip hop Tom before. Like, and it was like this whole other thing like started to take the forefront, and she was like, this is hilarious. And it was like every time we would go to your parties, it was like this other guy showed up, and it was like we would just have this like crazy time, like dancing to, you know, what was at the time so different from the scene that I was a part of. Yeah. But, you know, I mean, your parties were a scene. They were like a really heavy scene. And not every party was like that. You know, there were lots of parties in New York City that were just parties, but what you were doing was something else. Like, it was really, really cool to experience.
Thank you. Where were you playing mostly in Chicago before coming to New York? Was it just raves, or were there like, did you have residencies?
No, I mean, like, you know, I mean, the reason I moved was because I kept hitting my head on the ceiling in Chicago. It was like, you know, the most innovative thing I could do was like start a new residency at a new club. that was like not enough for me. You know, I had a residency at Smart Bar. I had a residency at Red Dog. Like, you know, all of these kind of seminal clubs, Red No 5, like all of like the most important clubs in Chicago at the time.
Yeah.
You know, I was playing. Material was this big house party on Friday nights that Colette and a bunch of other people used to throw. And one of the funny things is that I used to get booked all the time with Derek because I was the only DJ in Chicago that wasn't trying to be Derek Carter. Like everyone else was trying to like play his sound and like cop his vibe. And I didn't, you know, that was, I mean, I love Derek. Derek's the reason why I DJ, but never once did I ever think to try to step into whatever it is that he does. So we started to play a lot together those few years that I moved back to Chicago from like 2000 to 2003. And, you know, I was playing loft parties in Wicker Park. I was playing raves all over the country. I was, you know, doing all these different things. And it was, I mean, it's weird. It's like I've always kind of been in like multiple worlds. There's never been, you know, I feel really bad for these guys who have gotten like really, really big and they just get like squeezed into this like one corner and they only do that over and over and over again. That would be so boring. I'd quit. Like I wouldn't want to do that. Like, and it's great because even now, you know, I on a Friday night might play a party for Suzanne Barsh and play to like all the drag queens and all the trans girls and you know, like the absolute best crowd you'd ever want to play to in New York City. And, you know, the next night I'm playing a rave in Tempe. And it's like, you know, like to like, you know, the squarest, straightest, whitest kids.
Yeah.
And it's like, but then, you know, and then the next thing I play is like, you know, a house party that's like deep down and dirty and it's like back to the roots. And if I didn't have all of those things and couldn't go between all of those worlds, I'd be so bored.
Yeah. Why did you go to Atlanta?
Okay, this is going to be the really funny part of this. You're going to trip. Like, so this friend of mine, the one that was into hip hop, so we were like in the Midwest.
Was this 99 to 2000 then?
No. I was in Atlanta from 94 to 2000.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
So we moved in 94 because the rave scene started to get a little dark. And, you know, that's like when, I mean, really, you know, the UK kind of nails it in the way they explain this. Like the reason that drum and bass came into the scene was it went from like UK hardcore and then it like morphed into what they started to call dark side, and then dark side became like drum and bass and like jungle. Actually it was jungle really properly first. And all of that came about as a result of kind of the other side of ecstasy. Like everyone had been doing E and having this great time for a number of years. And then things started to get like a little crispy. Like everybody got like a little worn out. Yeah. And things got kind of dark. And we noticed that our friends in Chicago were starting to get into harder drugs. And we were like, hey, we can either get the hell out of here, go set up shop somewhere else, or we're going to get pulled into this and we're going to circle the drain. And we were like, you know, I mean, I give myself a lot of credit because at that time, like we were idiots. Like, I mean, like we were not responsible human beings. And the fact that we saw that and were able to remove ourselves from the situation, it saved our life, really. But the motivator, and this is the funny part, and if you think about this in context of what Atlanta then went on to become, it's even funnier. But the main reason that we chose Atlanta was because this buddy of mine that was so into hip hop, we were like, well, let's go to Atlanta and make hip hop. And that was the reason we moved there. Like, of course, we never made one hip hop song when we got there. Like, it was like, you know, he went in this like real serious crate digger jazz. I had like the best jazz record collection of anybody I've ever seen.
Wow.
Like, you know, me and this other friend, the three of us moved there together. You know, me and the other friend started like making beats, and we started making dance music, and we started meeting other people. And then I got the job running Satellite Records in Atlanta. So like that was what really cemented it going in the other direction. But what's really funny about this, and I have to tell this story. It's like, this is essentially an untold story, but if anybody is the person to tell this to, it's you.
Amazing.
You'll really appreciate this. So when I was running the record store, there was a club in downtown Atlanta. Downtown Atlanta was sketchy in the 90s. Like, I mean, Atlanta was sketchy in the 90s, like full stop. All of a sudden, I'm at the store one day and I get this phone call from the guy that ran this club, Karma, in downtown Atlanta. And he was like, hey, Tommie, can you come play this party? It's a private party. Like, it's gonna, you know, starts at midnight. I don't know when it's gonna end. Like, can you come play? And I was like, well, what do you want me to play? And he was like, doesn't matter. You can play whatever you want. And I was like, well, what's the vibe? And he's like, just, you know, cool music. And I was like, what the hell, you know, like trying to do the Rubik's Cube of like what that means, which is like, you know, okay, well, and this is, mind you, this is vinyl time. So, you know, I packed up like 4 crates of, like, of like, you know, all different kinds of stuff. Well, I'm playing music and I'm starting to notice that there's like not a lot of people in the club. Like there's only like maybe 20, 25 people. And at one point I was like, all right, I put on a long record, had to use the bathroom. And I walked across the club and I started to look around and I was like, oh my God, oh my God. And I realized that the only people in the club were basically the entire upper echelon of the Atlanta music scene. And when I say the Atlanta music scene, I am not talking about dance music. Yeah. So this is Andre and Erykah Badu. It was TLC. It was Jermaine Dupri. It was Babyface. It was, you know, everybody. Like it was Goody Mob, CeeLo, you know, the whole run. Like everybody was there. And everybody was really, really happy. And I couldn't figure it out. And I got, you know, I kind of went home perplexed by this whole thing. And of course, I didn't engage with anybody. That was like, it was, you know, like an eyes wide shut, like blindfold the piano player thing. It's like, get in the booth and play music and shut up. And like, so then he called me again to do it. And I was like, yeah, that was fun as hell. Like, let's do this again. And I, you know, I showed up and I was like, all right, I like pulled him aside and I was like, you got to tell me what's going on here. Like, this is like clearly something, there's something going on that I don't know about. And he was like, oh yeah, these are MDMA parties. Like, this is all these hip hop cats, like, you know, grooving. Like they're just like digging the music and just hanging out. And I probably did probably 3 or 4 more of them. And what was really funny is that as I was getting ready to leave Atlanta, probably about 6 months after I had played the last one of those, I heard Bombs Over Baghdad for the first time. And I was like, you know what? I'm like, I'm not gonna get a delusion of grandeur here, but I can't help but feel like I may have had something to do with that, because I was playing drum and bass records to these guys as they were laid out and feeling really good. And that might have inspired them to go like, hey, we should fuck with this. And like, maybe we should try something different. And I mean, it makes me super happy every time that's like playing somewhere. I'm just kind of, I get chuffed because it's like, you know, that's like this total bizarre happenstance thing. And it's just so funny because like, if you think about in the context of like why we moved there and what we wanted to do in our original kind of motivation. And then in the end, having some sort of like weird osmosis influence on like what is clearly, you know, one of the greatest groups that came from that is just like, it's really awesome. And it just like, it made my whole stay there kind of like make sense.
Yes. And another, you know, another big part of this story, which I'm so happy that you mentioned, that your amazing outcast experience, is, you know, these kind of like cultural, really shelled small genres that then were able to cross-pollinate the world because of the web. And, you know, we didn't really have a lot of access to knowing about what was happening in other places until, you know, the internet came about.
I mean, first of all, like, how did we know about bands? That's what blows my mind, is that like, you know, even back in the 80s, you know, we would read NME and we would like, you know, watch, you know, kind of what people were writing in magazines. And that was like all you could really go on. And you'd go into a record store and you'd talk to the people who worked there.
There was also 120 Minutes and Headbangers Ball.
Oh no, for sure. I mean, like, no, MTV was a huge kind of driving force of all that. Believe it or not, MTV came to Medusa's. Dave Kendall did a show from Medusa's, and it was wild. Like, I mean, like, we had the time of our life that night because we all knew we were going to be on MTV.
The time in Atlanta is like really when you got into the rave scene throughout North America?
Yes. I mean, like, yeah.
Like, did you play Buzz and Fever? Because that was what was going on in DC and Baltimore.
I didn't play Fever until like the middle, in like it was like the early 2000s I played Fever. But like, no, I mean, I was playing a lot in Nashville. I was playing a bunch in Louisville. I was playing in Alabama. I was playing in Florida. And the main big place that I was playing was for Donnie in New Orleans at the State Palace Theater.
Wow.
That was like, I mean, he was the king of the South.
Yeah.
I mean, arguably still is, but like, I mean, his parties at the State Palace Theater were unlike anything I've ever seen in the United States. Like, his parties were bananas. I've just never seen anything to that level of lawlessness and freedom and complete unhinged hedonism. His parties were the best.
You were playing those from what years?
Like, I started playing for Donnie in '98. So I met Donnie at Winter Music Conference, and he was wearing like a bad Hawaiian shirt, and I was probably dressed in like polyester bell bottoms, and we just took one look at each other and we were like, okay, brother from another mother, like, where do we go from here? And he was like, hey, you want to come play New Orleans? And I was like, yeah, great. And so like that began the chaos.
When did you start going to Miami for Winter Music Conference?
My first Winter Music Conference was 1996. I'll tell a brief story about my first year there.
Okay.
I was at Josh Wink's party, and he was getting ready to play. I think Dozia was playing at the time. I'm on the dance floor. I'm having the time of my life. I'm like, oh, this is the best thing I've ever been to in my life. I'm having a drink. It's great. And all of a sudden, I'm so like not paying attention to what's going on around me that I proceed to spill my drink all over Kenny Dope and Todd Terry.
Oh my.
And I'm like, you know, some kid who is just a fan of dance music. I don't even think I'd made a record yet. So like, I was mortified, and I just turned around, and they, you know, they're like legit dudes. Like, they come from the neighborhood. Like, you do not want to fuck with Todd Terry and Kenny Dope. And they looked at me, and for like 2 seconds they were pissed. And then I just turned like white as a ghost, and they were like, it's okay, buddy. Like, don't worry about it. Like, they saw, like, I literally looked like I was going to throw up, and they were like, oh yeah, this poor kid, like he's going to like lose his mind. And, but those early days of Winter Music Conference when you would show up to this thing, there was a finite number of people. It was like 300 or 400 people that came to Winter Music Conference, and they all knew each other. So when you showed up new, everyone was like, who are you?
Yeah.
They, you know, like, you're obviously like new here. We don't recognize you. Like, where are you from? What do you do? And I remember that first year being at the bar and looking around, and I couldn't comprehend what I was seeing, because it was like, you know, you're standing there and it's Jeff Mills and Richie Houghton and Carl Cox talking to Armand Van Helden and Masters at Work. And, you know, but then you've got like Derek Carter and Mark Farina, and it just made no sense that like all of these people were like hanging out, having a good time. Everybody knew each other, like, and there were no kind of dividing lines. Like, everybody was just like homies, and we were just all having a good time.
Yeah.
And that intimacy is what drew me into wanting to be a part of this. Like actually having tangible friendships with these people that you looked at as giants, but then all of a sudden it was like, oh, well, wait a minute, they're just like kids that love like dance music like me. And the next year was the first year that Daft Punk was there. And, you know, we were like hanging out with Thomas and Guy, and they were just like these crazy kids from Paris who like loved Chicago house music. And it was like, you know, mind blowing, because we could, you know, no one could have ever known that any of us would have turned into anything. I mean, you know, that first year, I remember there was one party every night. It makes no sense now, because there's like 80 parties every night now.
Wow.
There was one party every night, and it was Danny Tenaglia playing a groove jet. And Danny's on, and everybody in the world is in this room. Like, every single person that makes dance music, from DJ Icy to, you know, Underground Resistance, is in this room. It was like, you think about that now, and it's like, that would never happen now. But like, you know, you walk in, you get on the dance floor, you know, every single person on the dance floor you have records from. Like, Carl Cox is dancing on the bar. Danny Tenaglia is like talking to Carl Cox over the records. Like, Laurent Garnier is dancing on the bar. And it's like, what is happening in here? This is insane. And it was like, it was really magic, because it was like, this is the culture that I always wanted to be a part of. I wanted to be a part of subculture. I wanted to be a part of something that was anti-establishment and was like, you know, in the fringes. And yeah, we were all trying to do stuff and make moves and things like that, but we didn't want to do it on anyone else's terms. Like, we wanted it to be completely on our own terms. And somehow, over the course of all of this, we really did it. I have never taken a remix that I didn't like the song of. I have never played a gig for someone I didn't like. I never did anything that I didn't want to do as an artist. And, you know, I suffered for that in different times. You know what I mean? Like, I could have taken the bait at the beginning of EDM, and I could have been like a Normo star, but like, I didn't want to do that, because I knew I'd hate myself.
So what happened when you went back to Chicago? We didn't go into that.
Yeah, so I went back to Chicago. You know, that was right around the time where I was getting into what became Electroclash. Mm-hmm. And I mean, the main reason I moved back to Chicago was to work with Felix, because we started working on all this music together. That was magic, because like, you know, Felix came to Atlanta, and he came into my record store, and he looked at me and he was like, who the fuck are you? And, you know, here I am in cowboy boots, jams, a Misfits t-shirt, and a cowboy hat. And that was like pretty typical for me at that point. And he just, like, in his head, couldn't do the math. He was just like, what is this guy on about? Like, I just don't know what to do with him. And within 5 minutes, he said to me, would you come up to Chicago and make some music with me? And I was like, yeah, whatever that means. Like, I had never been in a studio in my life. So I packed up a bunch of records and we sampled a bunch of stuff, and that's how we started getting into it. But then I ended up kind of leading him down the electro clash path, and we started to get together what became the Kittens and the Glitz record. And I wrote Silver Screen and Happy Hour on that record, and we produced Glitz Rock together. There's actually a conversation between the two of us in the middle of the album, but like, then the next record, we worked on it again here in New York. And that was one of the main reasons I moved to New York. So it's funny. It's like Felix is wrapped up in this a lot. But like in Carroll Gardens, there was a studio called Good and Evil that we recorded at, that I ended up then recording with DJ Hell in. And bringing James Murphy to come play. It was like pre LCD. We were working on a track, and I was like, hey, James, can you come play drums on this? And like, he came by and played drums on a track, and it was like,
did
cool.
I tell you that I got Hell on a Zoom?
Oh, Hell was a huge part of this.
I know.
Huge.
Godfather.
What's funny about him is that he was so unbelievably ahead of the curve that in that moment, this is, of all the things to remember, but this is such a funny thing. The first person I ever heard play Benny Benassi's Satisfaction was Hell.
Whoa.
When he played that record, everyone in New York City was like, what the hell is this? Like, when you look at things in the way that they're remembered now, it's kind of difficult to separate them from what they became. And, people hear like Day and Night, like the Crookers remix of Day and Night. No one remembers the backstory of any of this stuff. And the funniest part of that record was, I remember when that record was done, and A-Track was like, yeah, I think we're just gonna give it away. And it was a free download on SoundCloud. They didn't release it at first. Yeah. And because he was like, it's too weird. And then like, a year later, it was being played on like, the biggest commercial radio stations in the country. Mm-hmm. And, Crookers got like a career out of that record. But in the same breath, Cuddy was hanging out at Hero Ballroom. Like, we were like, he was around all the time. Yeah. It was like, who's this guy? He's like, oh, he's like a rapper, whatever. Like, and then all of a sudden, a year later, he was a big deal. Yeah. But we saw that in real time all the time. Oh, yeah,
he was at Sway all the time. And, and then I did the release party for Day and Night at Luke and Leroy with Fool's Gold. And they brought the pressings of the vinyl, and he's like overjoyed and performs the song. And then like months later, after the song was gaining a lot of momentum, I was like, yo, congrats. Like, this is amazing. And he's like, Roxy, I'm going to tell you something. I sent you my music on like through AOL Instant Messenger, and you ignored me. And I was like, oh shit. I was like, well, to my credit, I was getting bombarded, and I still do.
Those stories are the best.
I know.
We were just so lucky, and continue to be lucky, to be part of something that is so kinetic and so it's constantly reinventing itself. There's always someone new that's doing something different, that's revolutionizing whatever it is that we like. And it's just, there are so many people whose lives become this one moment, and that was the only time they ever had any fun. And it's like, I can't even imagine that, because here I am at 50, and the good times keep coming.
To be around this era that, it was so new. Electro Clash to me was like, this is punk rock. Like, this is what I live for. So a little bit about my backstory. So I was born in DC, but I was like in between the suburbs of Baltimore and DC. I was really immersed in the punk scene, and had a punk band, and then moved to New York to go to Pratt in 97. Justine D became my second roommate though in 2000. She was doing Making Time with Dave P in Philly. So
Right.
I started to go to Philly. And so going to Philly, I was like, this place is cool. You know, like New York is like not the same anymore. And I took a design job in Philly and then started going to Hollertronics. And then I became obsessed. And then I was like, Justine, these guys are like making the best music ever. And like, they're mixing together everything. It's amazing. And I want to promote them. And she was like, you should. And so that's how I really started.
I'll tell you, this is amazing because the timing is exactly the same. So I was throwing a party at the, oh gosh, the Marlin in Miami, right?
Yeah.
During Winter Music Conference. And I would always get the flyer money from Vice. Like you could always go to Vice for like the money for the flyers. It'd be like, you know, like that was really easy. They'd sponsor anything back then.
Yeah.
So I went to them for the flyer money and they said, Eric was like, okay. He's like, I'll give you the money, but you have to book these guys from Philly. And I was like, who? And he's like, Hollertronics. And I'm like, that's a dumb name. I don't want to put them on the lineup. And he's like, no, trust me, they're really good. And I was like,
wow.
Okay. I'm like, they can play from 12 to 12:30. I'm like, that's it. So, you know, Lobi and Diplo show up and we were like, who are these hip hop kids? Like, what the hell? And I'm standing with Felix, Arthur Baker, I'm sure Yost was there. Like, we're looking at these guys like, they're not our people. Like, what is this gonna be, right? And they start to play and we're all like, holy shit, what is this? These guys are crazy. And they're playing like AC/DC into Destiny's Child, into like God knows what. And like, we're just looking at each other going like, this is incredible. I just remember being so genuinely blown away. And it was just so awesome because it was like our expectations were so bent the other way that like the minute they started to play, like we just all were forced to recognize like what was in front of us. And it was like, oh yes, we all stand corrected.
Also, I found this. This is a Bigelow showcase at Central Fly, but it is sponsored by Vice. And
oh my Lord. That's what year is that?
I think this is 2003 or 4.
Oh my God.
Yeah, of course.
Central Fly.
The year's never on here, but.
Oh yeah, no, well, because you know, we all thought that, you know, the world was gonna end the next year, so who cared?
Yeah, exactly.
We certainly partied like that was the case.
Certainly did. So tell me more about the years you're in Chicago, but you're coming to New York a lot. You're working with Felix. When did you end up coming? How did like the arrival to New York happen?
Okay, so basically I was doing a club night called Electro Sweat in Chicago. And there was on the main floor of Red Dog, which at the time was the best house club in Chicago. Mm-hmm. There was a party on Friday nights called Sweat. And they had this room upstairs that had its own bar, probably held about 100, 150 people. And me and this guy, Jordan Zuida, who is from Detroit, like we joined forces and we were like, hey, we should like, let's pitch them and see if we can do this like small room, like upstairs. And of course they wanted it to be different music. So like, we were like, okay, let's do this. And we were playing like Italo disco records. We were playing Detroit electro. We were playing like anything that was like, you know, but also like Miami bass and like all this crazy stuff. Like it was just this weird like mess of like electronic music. Simon Reynolds, who's like, you know, basically like looked at as like the chronicler of electronic music going all the way back to the rave scene. He wrote an article in the New York Times about this kind of, you know, emerging 80s revival. You know, it wasn't called Electroclash yet. Mm-hmm. And he wrote this article for the New York Times and said, you know, Larry T and Spencer Product are doing this party called Berliniumsburg in Williamsburg in Brooklyn, and went on to like note these different parties throughout the country. And in this article in the New York Times, he mentioned that Tommie Sunshine was doing this party called Electro Sweat Chicago. And I was like, come on, like how the hell did, like, again, how did he know about this? Like, this is, you know, I mean, the internet was working at that time, but we certainly weren't using it the way we use it now. So somehow he found out about this and it was on his radar. And maybe about 2 weeks later, I went to Miami and I was throwing a party. This would have been, this was 2002. I actually think I threw 2 parties that year. There was a party on Ocean Drive, and it was like me and adults and Ectomorph and John Selway, and like, you know, Hell was there and God knows what else. It was crazy. But we threw this party and I met Trisha Romano for the first time. So like, she definitely has to come into this conversation because she was a huge part of my trajectory in New York City. So I met Trisha and we started talking, and then I played a set, and then this guy comes up to me and goes, "You're my new resident DJ in New York City." And I was like, "Who are you?" And he's like, "My name is Tommie Soleil. I work at the Tribeca Grand Hotel." And I'm like,
amazing.
You know, not the irony of Tommie Soleil is not lost on me. Our names were literally the same name. And like, so, you know, he's this crazy former race car driver from Egypt who like immigrated to New York City and like was just this force of nature that like was able to curate these like unbelievable experiences at Tribeca Grand. And so he says to me, he's like, "Yeah, I want to bring you once a month to New York to play." I think 2 weeks later, I came for the first time, and I think I played with Tiga in the basement of Tribeca Grand. And, you know, I was like, this is crazy. Like, you know, the parties in Chicago were fun, but the parties in New York were nuts. And so I came a second time, and I was playing not in the basement, I was playing upstairs in Tribeca Grand. One of the first records I played was Bang by the Yeah Yeah Yeahs, which was like an import, and, you know, was playing it off vinyl. And all of a sudden I see these kids who are like standing off to the side, and, you know, when I'm done playing the record, I put on something else and I feel like a tug on my jeans. And I turn and I lean down, and it was Nick and Karen. And they were like, "Hey, thanks for playing our record." And I was like, "Wait, you're the Yeah Yeah Yeahs?" And they're like, "Yeah." You know, again, everyone in the same room, like same story over and over again. We all got to know each other like from hanging out.
Yeah.
Like, it was like, you know, it wasn't, you know, no one looked at, I mean, and I guess that's kind of some of the magic of it, is like when we all met each other, like nobody was like, "Oh, like, what can you do for me?" Like, nobody thought like
there was
that.
no
like,
preconceived notion or an expectation.
No, it was like, "Wow, you're cool. We're having an awesome conversation. You're not an asshole. Let's be friends."
Kitten and the Blitz, that came out when?
So we recorded it in 2000 and it came out in 2001. That was the first time I really came to New York, like, as somebody. I had come, like, you know, working at Satellite, came to visit and whatever, but no one knew who I was, and I had nothing to back it up. But like when I came with Felix, and we started playing pretty regularly together at Centrafly. So like he would get booked at Centrafly and he'd be like, "Come with." He's like, "I'll buy you a plane ticket, like we can DJ together." And I was like, "Well, shit, I'm not going to say no to that. Like, of course." And so all of a sudden I had this traction in New York City. And then Casey Spooner had a birthday party, and it was the most decadent, I can definitely say this by a long shot, it's the most decadent party I ever saw.
Where was that?
In New York City. So Deitch had a space in Williamsburg that was probably 2 or 3 blocks away from Cokies. And you remember Cokies?
Of course.
How on earth was that a real thing? That was
It was
open until
real.
2005. That place was open until. I mean, there was this like revolving door from Tribeca Grand where we were like, we'd be in the basement for a song or two. We'd go upstairs for a cigarette. We'd look at each other and go, oh shit, we're out of blow. We'd get in a cab, go to Cokies, get Coke, get back in the cab, go back inside for a couple of songs, go up for a smoke, get back in a cab, go to Coke. And that was the whole
that was the real thing. You know what I found out from these interviews is that Cokies had merchandise. There was t-shirts.
I'd do anything for
right? So would I.
Anything. Have you ever read the Vice oral history of Cokies?
No.
Oh my God, it's online.
Oh my gosh.
You will lose your mind. They wrote almost nothing. It is all submissions from people telling their insane stories of Cokies.
So Casey Spooner's birthday, tell me about this.
So Deitch had like this massive space in Williamsburg that was by the water. And it was me, DJ Unknown, and Adam X played there. Wow. And, and Adam X was playing like old industrial records. And, I show up and I'm playing like ELO and Roxy music and, whatever insanity that like we were doing at that time. And I just remember at one point I'm DJing and I look in front of me and I'm like slack-jawed because I realize that it is a very young Jimmy Fallon who was on Saturday Night Live at the time. And he was dating Winona Ryder at the time. And the two of them were dancing in front of me.
I remember Jimmy Fallon coming to Lit. He had a crush on Justine.
Oh,
I mean, who didn't have a crush on Justine?
and who didn't he have a crush on? Like he was kind of like ever present in like the seediest parts of nightlife. And now he's like America's sweetheart.
Really is. I know. So surreal.
So insane. And there's two things that I have to mention. Like if we want to put this in context, we have to talk about like these two things. One is that when Fisher Spooner played, they did these shows at the Wooster Street space. They did these performances, and these performances were like, to say they were the hottest ticket in town is like, does it no justice. Like the amount of hype that was created around these shows. I was waiting in line to get into the show, and the person in front of me was Jim Jarmusch, the director, and the person behind me was Spalding Gray, like the like brilliant like monologuist and author. So this was the level of insanity that was going on here. And we get inside and it's like, oh, look, it's Parker Posey and Justin Theroux. And oh, look, it's Courtney Cox and David Schwimmer. And like, it was like, what the fuck? Like, these are like, why are all these people in New York? And why are they at the Fisher Spooner gig, right? Well, the 3 nights that they did the shows, I think they did 2 shows a night. I played the after parties for all 3 of them. And the first night was at Soho Grand. And then the other 2 were at Tribeca Grand, right? Mm-hmm. So the first night I DJed and I'm on the decks, and I'll never forget this. This is like one of my funniest memories of New York City. I'm playing Debbie Gibson, Only in My Dreams, right? And Casey Spooner and Jeremy Scott are dancing on this antique couch in Soho Grand that splits in half. They like destroyed this couch. It was probably, thousands of dollars like couch that never in a million years did they ever think that anyone would be stupid enough to get up on and dance on. But it was Casey Spooner and Jeremy Scott, and who the fuck was going to tell them not to? Yeah. So they destroy this couch. Night 2, we move over to Tribeca Grand. I DJ again. It's totally insane. And then the Saturday night, which was the final night of the shows, I played live. And we performed live with Maddie from The Rapture in a cardboard robot head, because he was like, well, I'll play bass, but I don't want anyone to know it's me. And we were like, whatever, do you. But those performances were like foundational to like everything that came after, because the nightlife scene was cemented after that. Like, it was like, this is a scene. So there's two other bits to this that are important. I'll tell them in kind of disjointed order, but it's fine. We're not really talking on a timeline, and time is an illusion anyway, so who cares? So when I was playing for Tommie, the reason why he was able to put me at the top of a flyer was because I was signed to Gigolo and I was Tommie Sunshine from Chicago. So I was like, I was a thing.
Import. You're an import.
Right, correct. So when I moved to New York, I expected that the gravy train was going to continue and I was going to keep playing for Tommie. And 1 month turned into the next, and I was like, I haven't heard from him. This is weird. He's like, you're not Tommie Sunshine from Chicago anymore. He's like, you live here.
Wow.
And he was like, but it was tough love, because we talked probably 10 years later. I was furious at him, really pissed. Like I felt incensed. I was like, why would you do this to me? But he was like, I did not want you to become one of the guys that plays at the hotels in New York City. He's like, I knew that you had bigger pastures to explore, and I wanted to force you to go find them. And it was a blessing. It was a gift. I mean, if he had just like put me back on, I probably, I don't know, I might be playing in a hotel lounge somewhere right now, and I would have never had the career I've had.
I doubt that, but
Well, you know, I don't know. But like, you know, but that's one. But the other one that's really important is that the reason why I think electroclash became such a huge thing in New York City, what everyone forgets is that the first electroclash festival, which Larry, it was supposed to be Larry and Hell, and then Hell, they got in a fight about the name, and Hell ended up not being a part of it in the end. But Larry threw this festival at Exit, which was this like massive super club. The first electroclash festival was 1 month after 9/11.
Yeah.
And this is a very like often overlooked like moment of this, because the city was, as you know, you were in it. It was in a very peculiar place.
Yeah.
And I'm unsure that there was another event that happened before that, at least to that scale, where people allowed themselves to have a good time. So not only was this like the kind of seeding of this genre of music, but all of the people in attendance had basically been like in grief for a month.
Yeah.
So everybody brought their like everything to this club, and it was all on the line. And you know, I flew in from Chicago, and you know, me and all of the people that were like in that scene in Chicago like came to the festival, because we were like, this is going to be important. We knew it was going to be important. I will never forget, Crossover came out on stage. They used to work at a store called Smile on Nylon.
That store has come up a lot. And
no, hugely foundational.
Yes,
like
huge.
And I'll talk about that in a second, because it's important that we do. But so Crossover came out and they performed, and we were like, this is the greatest thing ever. Then Kid Congo Powers played. He played, and then Peaches came out. And like, I mean, I was like already a huge Peaches fan, but there was a lot of people who had never seen Peaches before and didn't know what Peaches was all about. And Peaches hit New York City like a Mack truck. And then there was all this anticipation for Fisher Spooner. And, you know, Fisher Spooner had not done a show of this size. And then they come out and just, you know, Casey just completely commands the stage. And we're just like, and, you know, stopping the songs in the middle and like just the greatest shit. Like just like so meta and insane and like nothing anyone had ever seen before. And I'll never forget this. Again, this is another huge part of this story that gets like lost in the wash. The festival gets a unfathomably glowing review in NME. And guess who wrote the review? Gavin McInnes.
Wow.
And in this review of the Electroclash Festival, he says that this moment is one of the most important moments in the history of New York's music. And he was right. Like, I mean, like everything took a turn from that festival. As you know, because you lived it, like all of our scenes existed together. Yeah. Like Tiz was not more important than Sway, and Sway was not more important than Tribeca Grant. Like all of these places were important, and all of us together came together.
Yeah.
To make all of these things great. Like the reason that New York started to get all of this press was because of all of the things that were going on in New York. It wasn't just because of the bands, it was because of all of the things. And, you know, all of this kind of pushed together. We all went up together.
Do you think we could do a part 2?
Oh, anytime.
Okay, because I think this is like foundational, like amazing.
Yeah.
We have really just started to get to like the middle of the decade.
All these little like stories and stuff, like because it all together, it all makes so much sense. I'm so excited. This is so awesome. You're like making me remember like stories I haven't told in years.
Oh, it's fantastic. Thank you so
awesome.
much.
Thanks for hopping by. That's it for this week. Don't forget to subscribe, like, share, comment, and stalk. Bounce, little kitty.